Good morning, all. We will call the Administration and Projects Committee meeting together for Thursday, June 5th. And good morning. Welcome to all. And first item on our agenda this morning is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on any item not listed on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public comment period, go to the approval of the minutes of the May 1st meeting. Any amendments or a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. A motion from Taylor, a second by Arnrich. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there anything anyone wishes to pull from the consent calendar? Okay, we have a motion for items 1 through 10, the entire consent calendar. Do I have a second? And I have a motion from Hudson, a second from Butt. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item under the regular agenda items is our legislative update, and I understand that Mr. Watts has a plane to catch, so we will be expedient this morning. And for the record, we are pulling item number 14 off of the agenda altogether. The investment policy will come back at our next month's meetings. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Chair and members. This is an exciting time to be working in Sacramento this week. The Budget Conference Committee has got off to a start. I thought I would cover briefly what's at stake in the budget for transportation and talk about the cap and trade conversation that went on last night and update you on that. Then I have two bills I want to just briefly bring to your attention or update you on. So first, in the budget, probably the most promising thing that's been proposed was the governor's early repayment of about $337 million in outstanding loans that transportation had made to the general fund over the last decade principally. And that was welcome because it means new resources for transportation in the year. The governor's proposal splits the money up more in favor of the state in terms of where the money would end up, shop, maintenance, and some technology projects. The legislature, pretty much both houses embraced that early repayment of the loans. The Assembly got over-enthusiastic and appropriated an extra $163 million from the state highway account reserve to bring forward into the budget year, and dedicated it and added it to the 337 to get to $500 million. And they shifted the relative mix more closer to 50-50 between local roads and the state rehab and maintenance. The Senate left the 337 and also shifted closer to 50-50 from what had been basically 60-40. So we're seeing a warm embrace by both houses to do something. Will the governor allow the extra 163 appropriation to stand? We don't know, but I think that's where both houses will close out on today when they get back to it. Just to update you, the last several days have been, in the Budget Conference Committee, have been focused on other policy areas. And last night, about 6 o'clock, they got around to the area that contains resources, cap and trade, and transportation. And the very first item was the discussion on cap and trade. So there was a very, very, I think, good foundational conversation. They didn't arrive at any conclusions. In fact, the chair started off by saying this may take us a couple of weeks given the posture of the three involved entities. The governor is looking for just his plan, straightforward, 14-15 expenditures only, and he wants to keep a rein on the estimates that are being used to frame his program. He proposed $850 million, which recognized $750 in likely revenues, and then took another 100 that he had set aside last year from cap and trade and brought that in to make an $850 million package that included money for sustainable communities and a number of other programs. The Assembly took a broader view and raised the revenue estimate to over $1 billion. I think it was $1.04 billion. And spent it in a similar way that the governor had proposed, but not directly aligned. So I would just say there that the administration's caution and the governor's approach to keep the revenue estimates down, that's going to be a challenge for the Assembly since they've already added over $150 million to that package. The Senate had a package moving forward that dealt with the actual budget year proposal as well as a long-term proposal as it went through the subcommittee. But as it got to the full committee, they essentially struck the entire budget year allocations and appropriations out of it. So they're going into conference with completely different perspective than either the governor or the Assembly have taken for the budget year. And that was essentially to, from their perspective, put some handcuffs on the whole conversation so they could get to what they really want to do, which is the long-term plan. So the long-term plan was unveiled formally in a Senate Budget Committee hearing this week by Senator Steinberg and Senator De Leon. And what they have proposed is for 15, 16, and future an allocation plan that dedicates a certain amount of whatever revenues come in from cap and trade to a variety of programs. For example, transit would see 25% of the future cap and trade. Sustainable communities would share in a 40% pot that equally with affordable housing in TOD areas. So you'd see 20% for sustainable communities and 20% for affordable housing activities related to transit-oriented development. And the rest of the program does include some funding for high-speed rail and a small pot for intercity rail, which would benefit obviously Caltrain, the Lausanne corridor, and the San Joaquin corridor. But it's a small pot, but nevertheless, it's an acknowledgement of the need for rail beyond high-speed rail allocations. I think the issues, it's almost unanimous across the state between transportation agencies, similar to the push that MTC says it has taken here, which would be to the extent that there is funding in the budget year and longer term for sustainable community activities, it needs to come to the MPOs. The Steinberg proposal, because it's a framework, it's not entirely clear that it does that, but it has the promise of doing that. They have all the right watchwords in their one-sentence summary, but we haven't seen the language. The language is being worked on right now. So I think the push for the long range is to really focus on the Steinberg proposal and ensure that the allocations come directly to the regions. One comment, just to put in perspective, so you understand how it would affect transit in particular, because I took a sharp look at this. The standard state assistance for transit is the State Transit Assistance Program, and it's roughly $370 million. So if there were in 15, 16, or 16, 17, $3 billion, and under the Steinberg proposal, you would see $750 million in the pot for transit. For this region, they would use the state transit assistance formula, which means for this area, the money would be allocated to MTC, but then sub-allocated to your transit operators based on existing standard formulas. In essence, 750 is double what the state's providing now, so you'd see a trebling of transit assistance coming from the state between the standard source and the new cap and trade source. So that gives you a sense of perspective. Now, is $3 billion, going to be the level we see? Will we get there? I tend to think that that's probably in line with what we will see in the next 2 years. So I just wanted to kind of bring that whole discussion home so you understand the magnitude of what we're talking about.
Any questions about budget? Of course, it all has to go through the mixer, and then we'll see what comes out the other end.
Yes, and just on that point, the transportation components will be addressed this afternoon.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. Okay.
I had two quick bill items. The first is AB 1324, which is Assemblymember Skinner's measure that was amended to provide some assistance to El Cerrito so that they could go to the ballot. It was recently amended to allow the county to go to the ballot for a general purpose sales tax outside of the cap issue. There have been discussions. I understand there's been outreach from other counties starting to wake up to realize that they have issues that they hadn't really understood. Now that the bill's out there, it's prompting some conversations. The bill does not provide other cities in this county with the relief other than El Cerrito and the county itself. So just so you understand what the bill does and where it's at right now.
And what does it add a specific amount, or?
No, it doesn't. It just,
removes the cap?
It says, notwithstanding the cap, you can do one. And
wow.
I believe it, I don't know if, I'm sorry?
It's like the White Council bill.
Correct.
Okay.
Very similar.
And does it have a term limit on it, or is it just
It does
indefinite?
not. It does not.
Wow. Open-ended, huh?
Right.
Maybe we need to pile on that one.
Well, that's for you to direct.
Yeah. Newell?
Yeah, I mean, obviously what the concern is that we're all competing against.
Yeah.
And when you get, I mean, as wonderful it was that we got an exception, the fact is if the county does, then, you know, all of the information shows that if you hit 10% on sales tax, you're dead. So, you know, you might get up to the 9.5, 9 3/4, but when you get to 10, the public, that's just a number everybody understands. And, you know, while we might want to be in on this, is that going to help us or is that going to hurt us?
Yeah.
Because if we're going to come out for half cents, and our nexus to doing transportation funding and things like that, I think the survey shows we did a good job on that. They don't know who we are, but the fact is we're doing a good job. I just think that we're headed down the wrong road, and so we almost might think about whether or not it's worth, and I hate to say this, opposing some of these, because while we might jump on it, we may all have tax things on there, and none of us will win. It just won't happen. When somebody adds them up, there's 3 bills on there, and we're each going to get a half cent. Well, then, if you read the legislation, the math goes backwards. Some of them will say whoever gets the highest votes will win, right? Because you can't add them all up, because the cap is still the cap. So it's getting a little complex, and I think we ought to seriously follow this, but also think about that we might need to have that conversation with, that's great for El Cerrito, and now the county jumps on, so now that's our entire territory. And do we get affected if either one of those get one passed? We may be eliminated forever.
You're speaking of the city. The city is
Yeah.
not necessarily the county.
Right, but the fact is the way it's
But
written.
it's cumulative.
Some are looking at an accumulative that you wouldn't be able to add it, and particularly if the county did it.
Yeah,
it's
if the
countywide.
county goes, it's the same
We
territory.
might be eliminated from ever being able to come back to the voters till ours expires, which none of
Right.
us will be here. But,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's getting sticky, and the threshold of tolerance by the public has yet to be completely tested, but one can see some of the results, certainly in West County. The folks, there were a lot of issues there, I'm sure, but there was a point where they said no more, so.
Well,
And that wasn't a sales tax, but that was another issue.
just one point, too, that complicates matters. Any authority you have is going to be based on a special tax by
Right.
definition, which is a whole different challenge than folks,
Right,
cities in the county going for a general tax.
that's right, yeah, because they're going for a 50% threshold, and we're going for 2/3. Yeah, okay, we need to think about that. All right,
The other measure to update you on, I just want to tell you what a pleasure it's been working with Ross and Lindsay with Assemblymember Frazier on his construction manager general contractor bill. We had good success coming through the Assembly, but now we're testing the Caltrans engineers' patience. We've had a series of meetings. They're not very happy. They have an outlook that they've re-engaged in that says basically any work on the state highway system, they need to be involved. They need to do the construction inspection. They have to be at the table. And that is, that's fine for them to have that. It's not necessarily in line with what the management at Caltrans believes. I learned this week that under the advertise, award, and administer process, that the state doesn't really want to break that up and allow you to use their resources when you're in complete control of your contract. So we're going to have a tough slug of it. We're going to have to work very hard. Mr. Frazier is super motivated to get this bill, and it'll be a classic tussle in Senate Transportation. It hasn't been set yet, but I'll keep you posted as we move forward. So
Okay.
that would complete my report for today.
Awesome. Any questions of Mark? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
If I,
Yes.
not to get an answer now, but I get worried when I start hearing ads this early. What is a Senate Bill 2239 insurance, and does it have anything to do with this? Either it's a late advertisement, or they're starting early on this thing?
This is, I believe, I'm taking a shot in the dark, but if I heard the same ad, it's the Transportation Network bill. I didn't.
They called it insurance, that's why, but
Yeah.
when they call it insurance, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's something else.
No, it really is. It's the Ubers and the other
Okay.
organizations.
It's just a red flag went up. If I'm going to look it up, I just said keep my eye on it, because if I start getting more flyers than we got for assembly, then I'll know something's going on.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain that it's the issue of the liability for people who participate in the Uber.
I think
Process.
that's right. Yeah.
That's odd.
They're trying to cover that loophole there.
2 days after an election, you start getting ads.
I know. I know.
Well, they're trying to influence Senator DeSaulnier and your delegation more than you. That's really what that's all about.
Okay. If no other questions for Mark, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We tried to be expedient.
I got the message.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay, Lindsay, anything else?
Nope. I think
Okay.
if you want the Cliff Notes version of what's happening on the federal side, I'd read page 11-15 if you don't want to read all the other pages.
Okay, very good. All right, the next item on the agenda is item 12. We will take items 12.1 and 12.2 as a block because they are interrelated.
I'm going to let Martin actually kick this one off, and then you'll get a multitude of us chiming in.
All right.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. I normally don't come here, but since we're talking about things that cross over from the Planning Committee to the APC, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the Planning Committee discussed last night and prepare you for where we're going in the next year with regard to adoption of a countywide transportation plan by the end of this calendar year and development of a transportation expenditure plan, or TEP, hopefully by the end of 2015. So last night the Planning Committee talked about the overall schedule for the CTP, and we've really made a lot of headway on that document. The outline has been approved, the vision, goals, and strategies are approved. We have essentially a 3-volume countywide plan, and Volume 2 and 3 are essentially complete. Volume 2 is the action plans for routes of regional significance, and Volume 3 is our countywide comprehensive transportation project list, which is the universe of projects. Every project under the sun is listed in that Volume 3. Come this June, we're going to go to our technical coordinating committee on June 19th with the meat of the countywide plan, Volume 1, and that's going to actually go public then on June 19th. On July 2nd, the planning committee is going to see the draft countywide plan, and then on July 16th, the authority will approve release of the draft countywide plan along with the draft EIR on that document. So from there, we go through the comment period into September, and we hope to adopt the final 2014 update to the CTP on December 17th, 2014. The CTP is important with regard to developing a TEP in that it's got a $11 billion project list, and we obviously have to narrow that down to get to some kind of an expenditure plan. We need to prioritize and start making important decisions about which projects do we keep for the TEP. And to get to where we want to go, we have to really have a very extensive public education and outreach plan. And that's where I'm going to segue into 12.2 here, and I think the lion's share of the discussion here will be about 12.2. And Lindsay is going to start off that discussion. And to my right is Jill Nelson-Golub from BMWL, and she's going to help us out. So with regard to public outreach, the authority approved an agreement with Gray Bowen, the Gray Bowen Ericsel Consortium, and BMWL is a sub to that, along with Circle Point and others. And that contract was approved in January 2013. It was a $600,000 agreement. In July of 2013, you approved a task order to get us through the full fiscal year. And we're approaching the end of that fiscal year. Gray Bowen team's done a lot of work on the contract. They did a couple of pollings. They did focus groups. They've had stakeholder outreach. They've provided strategic assistance to the staff here. And that contract is going to be essentially fully expended, I would say, by the end of the summer. So we really need to look at what kind of an outreach plan we have for the next fiscal year, starting July 1. And we want to budget for that, and there are a number of issues there in terms of how far out we go. The bad news is it's going to cost a lot of money to do a full outreach plan and to make sure we reach everybody. The good news is that it's going to be federally funded, and this contract is federalized. So when we talk about the funding, remember these are STP funds, Surface Transportation Planning Funds from the feds. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lindsay, and she'll lead the discussion on the outreach plan.
Thanks, Martin. Good morning, commissioners. Before we jump into this, I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to why we're talking about this public education and outreach plan today. As a result of the polling that we did in January and March indicating that voters would potentially support a future ballot measure, the Authority Board directed staff to come back with a comprehensive public education and outreach campaign to kind of help get us to a yes, potentially in 2016 if the authority decides to go. Although the proposed plan that you have in your packet talks about kind of the whole activities through the summer of 2016, what we're going to dive into this morning is really just the activities slated between now and the end of this year, December 2014. Part of this was because we wanted to get a sense of the authority's objectives for public inclusion, and also just to kind of narrow this down to a smaller conversation. Instead of talking about a potential 2-year plan, we can kind of bite off a manageable chunk of time and talk about those activities scheduled for that. As you may know, the countywide transportation plan is designed to identify the transportation needs for the future, and what we've done is tried to align the public education and outreach plan to begin about the time we release the draft of the countywide transportation plan to the public. This really gives us a chance to kind of start a two-way dialogue with the public about what they want to see in their vision for the future. Currently, a lot of our activities, our press releases, our content on the website and social media, our press outreach is a little bit of a one-way conversation. You know, we're putting all of this information out there, and we're trying to elevate awareness of our agency, and we're hoping that people are paying attention and soaking it up. But it's still a little bit of a one-sided conversation. So the goal of this kind of new public education and outreach plan is really to start a two-way dialogue with the public, to really try to get them to give us their feedback on what they think is important, and make sure that we're not missing anything. Maybe there's a wonderful idea out there for for a marquee project that we just haven't thought of yet. All of the elements of the plan are designed to work together and kind of reinforce each other. That's why there's multiple channels of communication listed. One assumption that we made in preparing this plan that you have in your packets today is that the Authority Board wants to be as inclusive as possible and include as many residents as possible in the visioning process. We wanted to be sure at the end of the day that you could confidently say, we've left no stone unturned. We have really done our absolute best to reach out to everybody to get their opinion. But as Martin said, that tactic of leaving no stone unturned is also a little bit expensive. Luckily, all of the activities that we're presenting to you today can be funded through federal dollars. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at this plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill, who's going to talk you kind of through the strategies and the reasoning behind Attachment B, which is really the item in your packet that outlines the activities scheduled between July 2014 and the end of the year, December 2014.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, Commissioners. So as Lindsay said, we worked with staff and the ad hoc committee to develop a comprehensive communications and outreach plan that would support the development of the countywide transportation plan. We've done public outreach programs for public agencies before, and we've also looked at other similar programs in the Bay Area, particularly related to transportation measures. And what we found was that the most effective program was one that incorporated all or as many tools as possible, that we're not quite completely in a digital age, but we are approaching that. There are still segments of the population, particularly in this county, that require different modes of communication. To that end, we're proposing 4 ways of engaging the public. One is an online engagement tool that would provide people with a way to access through the CCTA website a way to review the countywide transportation plan and weigh in on things that they think are important or that they believe might be missing projects. We are proposing 4 regional workshops, so in each community, to invite the public in to have a dialogue and a conversation about the countywide transportation plan. 1 telephone town hall, which would be basically a telephone version of the workshops where people would be able to call in, stay on the line, and ask questions and engage with some speakers. And then a printed version of the online survey so that staff and commissioners and other stakeholders can go to meetings where people may not be able to come to a workshop. We can go to a sort of engaged communities and have them fill them out there and return them. And then to support all those tools, because it's not, we don't want to waste funds, so having an online tool where we don't direct people to it, we're not going to get a very high engagement, and we want to ensure we're getting engagement from all segments of the community across the county. We're proposing a combination of mail, online advertising, and in some situations, some telephone support. And particularly for the printed survey, we are proposing to prepare a stakeholder toolkit for the commissioners and for stakeholders so that you'll have the materials needed to go out into your own communities and other elected officials who are interested to encourage people to participate in the town halls, in the telephone town hall, on the online tool, or fill out the printed survey. That would include draft newsletters, draft letters to the editor, talking points, and copies of the printed survey. And then you'll see at the end of the transportation plan on Attachment B, there's an optional year-end progress report. The goal of that is if people are unable to engage in the process, that they still have a way to keep up to date on what's going on. So it would be a year-end report, as we discussed last night, about maybe possibly doing it in mid-January as opposed to December so that more people would be able to pay attention to it. But it would be a recap of the countywide transportation plan process and sort of also a great opportunity to talk about some of the projects that CCTA has worked on throughout the year. So as Lindsay and Martin said, this is a very comprehensive communications plan, but we think it will give us the best opportunity to engage as many people as possible in the process.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments before we kick off the discussion. One, my understanding from meeting with the subcommittee, the ad hoc subcommittee that we had appointed, that this framework that you have just outlined, Jill, is to be general in scope, and the specifics will still come back to the subcommittee or something for specific approvals and budget advice, et cetera. So we have an outline of a budget, but that's not pre-spending every dime. That's being permissive to some extent, but there will be check-ins. And
Correct.
as many of you know, I have issues with lots of big mailers and things like that. I don't think that's particularly the most expedient way to spend our money anymore. But and as anyone who watched the assembly race in Newell's district found out, that the thick stack of mailers was incredibly expensive. There were millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on them, and I'm not sure that it made a whole lot of difference other than perhaps making the public angry. So, and we certainly don't want to do that. So judicious use of the money, those items will come back to us. Secondly, I wanted to raise an issue because I've talked with a couple of my colleagues about this over the last couple of weeks, and it seems to me that the budget for this, instead of going through the end of this calendar year, seeing as the next item on our agenda today is budget for the fiscal year, it makes sense that we plan this budget for the fiscal year as well. And so I'd personally like to request that we, as one of the outcomes of our discussion today, that we direct staff to update the budget through the rest of this fiscal year and include it in the budget in 2 weeks, so that we have the whole year handled and we don't have to come back and do an amendment. I mean, it just makes more sense. We know we're going to go forward with it for another 6 months, so let's go ahead and include that. So with that, comments, questions? Newell?
Yeah, just in reverse, I agree with that. It would look a little disingenuous. We know we're going to do some aspect of this, so if it's not in the budget, we're not being as transparent, so I agree with that. But I wanted to take a step back, and the first comment is I think this is all a great idea. But the high-level view, we have to be really cautious on this, and something Lindsay said that we have to avoid. There's no action that we can do or no words that we can use that will indicate or talk about an election and trying to get to a yes vote. That's not allowed under state law. So as it was presented on this side of the table, it was about the engagement process and things like that. That's all we're allowed to do. In fact, we have to make sure that's what we are doing as our mission. And if in a future date we take some action that may include a public vote in something, it's not related to this. And we can't have those kinds of discussions. And it's really important for the integrity of our agency and the great work that we've done. And I think that we have demonstrated a great value proposition to our taxpayers of planning, executing, and operating these transportation improvements. So I agree with all of this. It's a lot of money, but I think I support it because of the engagement process. I'm not supporting it in that we're just going to go out and tell people what we've done. I want to make sure we let people know what we're planning, get their input on it, and then we react to that and take our collective experience and the talents here and execute the best plan we can. And I've also cautioned that when we spend money, I don't care whose money it is, we shouldn't say, don't worry about it. It's not our money. It is our money, and we need to be very, very cautious. I appreciate the Oversight Committee. And again, I know our enthusiasm is here to do the right thing, but we really have to be cautious that we're going to manage these dollars, appropriately use those to get the best bang for our buck, to engage our constituents, to come up with the best transportation plan we can and execute that. So overall, I support it, but sort of high-level cautions to frame our context for this.
Exactly. Dave?
Yeah, I think you both repeated what planning was saying last night in the budget, and I was stressing you put the whole budget down as the 600 because exactly as you said, something goes along. there aren't a lot of wallflowers here that have a problem killing something if they don't like it. I do believe in the flyers. I look at all the households, and I'm not so sure because it's not a campaign. It's a year-end progress report. If you do, I mean, you put a calendar on, people may keep that thing for years and wait for the American pickers to come out. But if you do that one right and it's a keeper, it's a winner. And I'm looking at 12.2-1, the two recommendations. We also thought that the letter that's going, if you're doing a 2014 progress report, don't send it out in December of 2014. You send it out in January. I know David Durant stressed, I can't remember, I think he said mid to end of the month. I mean, you can't jump on it too soon if you're going to do something unless it's December. Then you have done it too soon. But if we're going to do this thing, and it sounds like we are, let's make sure we have the funding, and that's what I heard earlier. Now how we're going to do it, we're watching it. We got some tight people here. They're not going to throw any money away. But when the mailer thing part comes along, I think depending on what you're sending out is going to make as much sense as and it better not sound like campaigning. But planning, those were our two comments. Let's get this thing as part of the next budget. Once only. Do it just once. That's what we're talking about.
Other comments on this item? Is that,
Okay, I'll move the staff recommendation on 12.2 because I'm too
With
lazy to put
those
my glasses on
amendments.
with those two amendments.
and that direction to staff
Yep.
to come back?
You got
in
the
2
notes.
weeks.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you all. I'm sorry, that was Hudson and Arnrich. Yeah, we get going fast sometimes. All right.
Wish you were there last night.
Well, you know,
And did that cover both?
yes, that was 12.1 and 12.2.
So was that in the?
12.1 was informational.
Yeah, 12.1 was the information on the countywide transportation plan and the status and the calendar for that. So thank you all. We appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is item 13. It is the budget.
Yes, good morning, APC Chair Pierce. I'll turn this over to Brian in just a moment, but just based upon the conversation on this last item, we do not have that budget amendment and the information that you'll be seeing this
No,
morning.
I understand
So
that.
if it is the consensus of the APC to bring that forward as a part of the proposed budget for next year, then we would be looking for that as a part of your recommendation.
Okay, that was also part of the last action, was the direction to include it in the budget. So we'll get it in both. That way there's no misunderstanding. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Chair Pierce and committee members. We are here this morning to present the proposed fiscal year budget for 2014-15 operating and capital budget. This budget is relatively unchanged from the presentation that we gave last month. The total expenditure plan is $278.1 million, which is an increase of $13.8 million over the adopted budget for 13-14 operating budget. The variation from year to year is dependent upon the timing of several marquee capital projects. The next few slides will give an overview and explanation of the proposed budget. As you can see here, the revenue sources include sales tax, federal, state, local grants, in addition to investment income and other financing sources, the bonds of 2012. We've also broken out the different departments, projects, programs, planning, administration, and debt service. The authority remains to have a balanced budget, and significant changes are a reflection of the current capital projects and program projections. As we increase budget projections for capital projects, the revenue projections are increased accordingly, whereas increases in program expenditures is the contributions from cities for the completion of transportation for livable communities project grants and increased payments for programs outlined in the strategic plan. As you've seen on the slide before, this basically shows the sales tax revenues in blue, historical, and our projections for the 2014, what we think we're going to come in about 2% over our budget. Next year's increase is going to be about 2.5% over what we received this year. That should be about $78.2 million. This slide is for informational purposes to illustrate the dramatic increases of federal, state, and local grants and contributions received by the authority. However, this slide only captures revenues that flow through CCTA. The vast majority of the state and federal grants are used on state highway projects and are accessed directly by Caltrans. Consequently, the actual leveraging is significantly greater than what our revenues show. For revenues received by the authority, sales tax revenue has increased 27% since 2010, whereas revenue from federal, state, and local grants and contributions has increased 456%. This slide here shows the projected revenues from capital projects, which has decreased $18.1 million to $75 million. The major decrease on this was related to the Caldecott Tunnel for RM2 money. The BATA funds is the increase of $9.9 million of BATA funds is the decrease, and the decrease of $13.6 million is attributable to the construction phases related to East Contra Costa, the quarter project. Moreover, the drop in grant revenue is a timing of projects and not because we have lost any grant funding. Several other projects saw reductions and increased based on timing of the expenditures related to the project. Overall, $75 million in grant funds is a testament to the work done by the authority to secure federal, state, and local funds for the construction of infrastructure in the county, in addition to the funds earmarked through the sales tax measure. The proposed 14-15 expenditures of $278 million. The project expenditures increased $4.6 million to $186 million due to the phases of the projects. Caldecott Tunnel decreased $30.3 million. BART East Contra Costa Rail Extension increased $26.3 million. The State Route 4 corridor reduced $7 million. The I-80 corridor increased $5.1 million. And a number of the major streets that are going to be taken care of this year would be the Kirker Pass at Geary Road, Camino Pablo, Clayton Road, Treat Boulevard, Alhambra Creek. What we have here is the top 5 project sections that will go over the major projects that make up the $180 million. The largest projects we have is the East County Corridors, which is going to be about $38 million. The BART East County Corridor Rail Extension is going to be about $36 million. Caldecott Tunnel still has about $24 million left to be spent in this fiscal year. SR4 East Widening is about $20 million. And then we have the sub-regional street improvements. And we have a number of projects listed there: the Marsh Creek Road, Kirker Pass, Buskirk, Contra Costa Boulevard improvements, Clayton Road, Treat Boulevard, and Alhambra Creek Bridge. So those are the major projects that we have scheduled through the projects division. Proposed expenditures for the administration's programs and planning have increased for fiscal year 14-15 by $8.8 million. The administrative salaries and benefits are $0.6 million, relatively unchanged from 13-14 budget, and represents 0.82%, which is below the 1% limitation established by Measure J. The program expenditures increased $8.4 million as expenditures associated with this division are directly tied to the sales tax revenue and the timing of projects earmarked by funding from prior year's revenue. The planning expenditures increased $0.5 million, with the additional work being completed by the county transportation plan, the priority development area projects, and then also we have the only increase that we had since last month. We added $200,000 on the SR4 corridor as matching funds to leverage grants to augment programs and studies related to the integrated corridor management implementation, connected vehicle pilot program initiatives, advanced arterial traffic management systems, and the conversion of high occupancy vehicle lanes. And debt service remains the same at $28.5 million. This wraps up our presentation on the budget. Our sales tax revenues continue to show growth year over year, and grant funding for projects are increasing as well. Expenditures for projects year over year are increasing as the authority is securing additional funding for larger scale projects. We are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions? Comments? Yeah, comments?
I would just add a comment. I think, first of all, I think the process this year is very clear. I think it presents itself. We're identifying well and highlighting the things that we're doing, which is building and solving transportation problems. I worry about our projections that revenue is going up, and I always worry that we're always about 6 months away from an economic downturn. It's kind of like at the national labs. We're always 3 years away from getting the NIF project going, 30 years later. But so I just caution that. I know that the trajectory is great. We use a conservative approach, but I still get a little worried that it's a little robust looking. But I think we have demonstrated over enough years that we have hit our marks and we haven't exceeded any of those. And clearly we want to have a good reserve. When we go out to sell some more bonds, the marketplace is a little different. We have a great rating, but having a good, healthy budget that is generally less than our revenue expectations shows our track record. It speaks for itself when we go to sell those bonds, and we'll get the best rate. So I'm excited by this. I think this year when you saw the projects cleaning up the Caldecott Tunnel and giving Bob a better ride home out there in East County, this is going to be a year, by the end of this fiscal year, I think people are going to really see some great improvements in East County that are finally going to say, we've connected enough dots to make it work. So I support where we're at.
Following up on that, Brian, I remember reading it somewhere in the budget, and I think it was around 3.7% or something like that. What real growth factor did you actually wind up with? Was it close to 4 for the revenue projections?
For the sales tax revenue projections, it's a 2% increase over the budget where we are for this fiscal year.
Right.
So we're going to end about 2% higher, and then 2.5% for next year.
Okay.
So in total, off of the budget, that would be 4.5% increase.
Okay.
Where some of our current data that we're receiving from the Board of Equalization is showing about 6%. So I went on a little bit on the conservative side, because
Okay.
you never know based on the changes that may.
As we're all having these discussions back in our home jurisdictions, we probably here have better information countywide what the sales tax is doing. Each of our jurisdictions are going to be a little bit different, but I want to make sure that mine that's relatively no sales tax isn't going too far over the top. So, okay, that helps a lot. Other comments, Dave?
Yeah, I'll do this instead of 19.2 or whatever. I don't know how we went 16 as 19.1 and 19.2, but I would ask Tom and a few of these other cities to really look into who's doing business. I'm surprised in my own city how much construction's going on. I went into AT&T the other day to look at our new city center project, and I expect to see sales tax actually coming online in short order, which, we weren't talking about how we're going to stop.
There's Amazon money in this budget.
It's absolutely amazing to me to see what the potential is. Maybe we're a little spoiled because we're looking at what's happening at Trans Bay and how fast it can happen, but it isn't just the other side of the bay. There are things happening here. Would love to find out from Ron Leone when he comes in here if Concord's doing anything. I mentioned that Pittsburgh and Antioch now are kind of in that care area, so they're going to be online to get grants to do stuff. So we could be in pretty good shape to really start looking out at big projects. And if we could just get somebody to lay some rail out to your neck of the woods, it would be nice to start moving out of the old and into the new.
Any other comments? Questions? Yeah.
Just a comment
Bob?
in response to Dave. You forgot, I loved your, Pittsburgh, Antioch, but the important people. But I would like to emphasize, since this board has just followed through with the Highway 4 projects, Brentwood, we've pulled quite a few permits already. So Brentwood is, we don't have to worry about the other two cities catching up. You're shocked. Brentwood's doing just fine, but again, with your participation, because once you get in, you can now get out.
That's right. And that's awesome. Newell?
I'd be willing to go ahead and move this item, recommend this go on to the full authority for the budget presented herein with the amendment that we do include the outreach budget for approximately $600,000 at the full level and bring it back at our meeting.
Okay, motion by Arnrich, second by Hudson to move the budget with the addition of the additional planning money for the full fiscal year 14-15 for the CTP, TEP outreach. And with that, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Awesome.
Thank you.
Back to somehow my outline got screwed up on my tabs here, so it's not going back to my outline the way I wanted to. All right, so 14 we have pulled, and the next item is correspondence and news clippings. Any questions, comments about that? All right, then I have no comments. Do commissioners have comments? Executive staff comments? Yes, Randy does. There's a big glass trophy here.
I have a couple comments. One is the Caldecott Tunnel was given the Project of the Year award by the California Transportation Foundation. So Kevin, our chair, Kevin Womack, was hoarding this trophy, and I barely pried it out of his hands the other night. So we have it here on display. And then,
So do we have a trophy case?
we're going to have to get one, I think. Randy's going to have to spring for a trophy case.
Right behind the desk over there.
Yeah. And then we're also given an award for the Caldecott Tunnel for the innovation. I think it's Innovative Transportation Solution Award. So WTS gave us this piece of glass. And then on a sadder note, Amin Abu Amara has announced that he's going to retire early and he's going to go work for a consulting firm. And so we're sad to see him go, but we're going to have to go through the process of backfilling his position, or just kind of maybe changing the way we approach that position. So Ross has got the lead on that, and with Randy's help. So those are my comments.
Okay, well, we're sorry to see Amin go, but we're glad he's staying in the general community. So I know he's not out here in the audience, at least if he is, he's hiding. All right? Yes.
When is he leaving?
His last day is June 20th, Friday.
Okay.
And so
Oh, here he is. He's right here.
There he is.
Here he is.
No, say it's not so. Yeah, you give us 3 weeks' notice, and then you say you're leaving. Yeah, okay.
I mean, I just told the members of APC that we were sad to see you retire. You're going to be leaving us and going to work for a consulting firm, and so.
So maybe we'll see you back here occasionally anyway. So.
How many years with us, Randy?
Pardon?
How many years has Amin been with us?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
8 years. He's gone from I used to call him a man of 1,000 questions to now he's a man of 500 questions. He's done really well.
Well, we wish you well. We are sad to see you leave, but we do wish you well. Well, I understand you're hopefully going to still be in the area some, so we can maybe see you occasionally. Awesome.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Through the chair? Sir, I would request, since you're going to a consulting firm, but that's what I understand, am I correct? So when you consult us, just make sure those fees are fabulous. There you go, thank you.
All right. Is there any other business for the good of the order? If not, we are adjourned to our next meeting. Oh, we better check. The next meeting is scheduled for July 3rd. Is there a problem with that for anyone?
I'm not on it, so I'm 90% sure that my daughter's got twins due on July, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm probably, so be here, Noel. Cool.
Okay,
You're-
everybody else is here?
If your mayor's in the cabin, he will come back. Your wishes.
All right, but it looks like we have 3 of us at least. We have a quorum. All right, we're good. So we are adjourned to the Thursday, July 3rd meeting. Thank you very much.
I gotta go.